Well, I'll be elsewhere.
Yes.
Yeah, that's probably what it was. Yeah.
Hey everybody, this is a wrap. Welcome to the wrap. For those who don't know, the wrap is a video, which we're on video right now. Yes, this is Hopefully. A video, and it's not just in the ether somewhere, but this is a video where we look back at last week. We're a little bit late, sorry. And so this is kind of an impromptu wrap, but it's still a wrap nonetheless. So we're going to look at last week's message. Generally, it'd be Jarod here and Pastor Chris over there, but as most of you know by now, in case you don't, he's been out with eye surgery, and I'm looking forward. He will be preaching this weekend here in Jackson.
Yes,
and you'll be back out in your Boco area there.
Yeah,
I like to stumble on my words. It's fun.
No, it's good. Yeah, and, keeps them on their toes. Keeps them
guessing.
Yeah,
and so, well, if you don't know, my name's Darren, by the way, and this is Jarod. Kind of just said his name, but
what's up, guys?
This is the wrap, and we're pastors here at Connection Point Church. They trusted him with the campus. They trust me with that room over there. And anyway, that's it. So this week we were in message 5 of this message series, Intentional Faith.
Yes.
And I think what it says right there, intentional faith. You can read it right over my shoulder. See? Intentional faith is how you know what the message series is. But it was week 5.
Yep.
And this one was basically faith on display in essence. And it concentrated almost entirely, though there were other verses, on one. I'll read it because normally we don't do this. It's kind of odd to do for the rap. But I'm going to read it because this is what this whole message was based off this one idea or this one verse. If James 1:26-27, this is the CSB. If anyone thinks he is religious without controlling his tongue, his religion is useless, and he deceives himself. Pure and undefiled religion before God the Father is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. And so that was the basis of the entire message. And that's an interesting verse because, number one, it uses the word religious. And so, which is interesting. We know it has all kinds of connotations, positive and negative, with people. And I know we're not going to rehash the whole messages we preached, but it does. Every time I see that, I think of from where I'm from, my background. If somebody called you religious, that wasn't necessarily a good thing.
Right.
But it has positive connotations.
Right, if you understand the way that it's being used. And we're in a unique situation today because you preached out at Bowling Green County, and so where it's awesome that we get to. Yeah, well, no. Well, you don't know this, but because we're friends, I listened to the sermon because I just wanted to hear how it went and some of the things that you said that I could go back and think, I wish I would have thought of that or whatever. So I haven't brought food yet up on stage, and so I really need to. I like that. That was good. So we both preached that weekend, and so that was awesome. But religion, I heard that you talked a little bit about different ways in which that word can be used, or how it's really a couple of different words, but we just translated to religious, and we just talked about how he's really just talking about how we relate to God. That's what he means by the term religion. We've heard it's not about religion, it's about relationship. Right. James wouldn't disagree with this, and so when he uses the word religion, he just means your devotion to faith, devotion to God, devotion to serving him. How do you relate to him? And so that's what James is really trying to lay out here. And as you touched on a little bit, that external aspect. Right,
because James, for those who don't know, historically, James was very active within the Pharisaical movement of the first century Jews. The Pharisees were very outwardly in their way of worship and their form of worship. It was a lot of value was placed in the way they looked and how they did things, right? It was all outward. And so James was kind of tackling this a little bit here. He's wanting you to know that, hey, I know you've seen those people that we've called religious for a really long time. Jesus talked about this, talking about the I guess the burial facilities painted in white and full of bones, right? And so basically that's what he's calling the Pharisees were, looks good on the outside, painted white and all, but inside it's nothing but death. Yeah. And so that's kind of what James is dealing with here. He's kind of reframing that idea that, look, you need to do these things. Yeah, going to church, reading your Bible, giving money, doing all those things are part of faith and religion and a good religion. But if that is the totality of your religion, and there is no inward change, and it just becomes a thing where it's on the surface, and you're just trying to impress people with your piety or your religiousness, there's where the issue lies. And I think that's all he was kind of hitting right here.
Yeah, and you think about the context and the culture of the day, that this is something that he had to tackle. And for some of us today, this is something that we need to look within ourselves as we look at how churches is ran. And I know that a lot of us at Connection Point Church won't have much of an issue with this. This will seem second nature.
Right.
But something that we have to understand is that was not second nature for them. And he's trying to address what's going on, the people in that culture who are in need of help, especially when you consider who he's writing to. And so I think what's beautiful about this is James is letting them know that this good religion is attainable. It's you don't have to be a trained religious individual, a Pharisee or
priest.
Or a priest. Thank you. And so he makes it a lot more attainable and reachable for the average individual.
Right. He's adding on to, even though it wasn't written yet, later on Peter kind of extrapolates on that, where he calls us all a chosen people, a priesthood, a royal priesthood.
Yeah.
And then he goes into this idea of, if anyone thinks he's religious without controlling his tongue. Mm-hmm. Now, that's another picture. I didn't go into this, and I don't think you did either, but it's another picture of those Pharisees of the time. In many cases, they did all these pious things. They would fast, and they would put ashes on their face to look sunken in, so they looked like they've been fasting for really. And they would pray really loud and elaborate prayers. And they did all these holy religious things, but then they were mean and cold and cruel and were very unkind to the people. All these things were also known as them. And so, if you can't control this thing, really doesn't matter. You can go through all the motions. Mm-hmm. This is going to probably be showing everybody what's inside of here.
Yeah. That's I like that connection, and something to take away, I think, from that example is when Jesus talks about how they're praying publicly and so their reward is already given to them.
Right.
I think that in that we're talking about context. In that context, that was something that was a good thing to be in prayer. I know if you walked down the street today, you wouldn't get that same kind of look. And so praying sometimes for us in public, not in a...
if you walk down the road praying these days, openly and outwardly like that, you may see a car with some lights on top of it come behind you pretty quickly.
It's not to say we can't pray in public, but what he is saying ultimately is what you're saying is that you need to make sure that you're matching that internal with the external. And you can sabotage your witness if you're not watching your speech. And
to be clear, he also it's going beyond just talking about the priest here or the Pharisees here. He's also talking to you and I and him and all of us, and that is the things that come out of our mouth. So whether it's gossip and slander and just absolute negativity, like all those things. And Jesus talks about it whenever he talks later on, but in Jesus' way, it sounds like it. Some people want to say you're saved by your words, when that's not what it's saying either, right? It's literally saying that the words are fruit of what's inside in your spirit. So your spirit is more or less seen by what comes out of your mouth.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that in Jackson. Luke 6:45, a good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and an evil man likewise. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. And so Jesus is really telling us that the words that you speak are really a reflection of the state of your heart. And so I think that that's really the takeaway from what Jesus is trying to tell us. And he's also trying to let us know every little decision, every mistake, every word that we say has consequences. Right. So we touched on that just a little bit as well in regards to how that our words, whether or not we're careful or not, can often represent how we feel.
And then he goes on. So that was the biggest part, probably. I thought I probably spent most of the time, I think I did, on the controlling the tongue part.
Same.
Yeah, because it's the most difficult.
Yeah.
And if you're like myself, I'm paid by the word in so many cases, so it's difficult sometimes with somebody who talks. And it's not always, and I think I made this point, it's not that verse, and I think a lot of people look at it mostly as those who talk a lot, right? Those who run their mouth a lot. But that's kind of it to some degree. Proverbs kicks into that a little bit, where it talks about where there are many words, there's the likelihood of many sins, which makes perfect sense, because the more I open my mouth, the likelihood is higher that I'm going to say something stupid that will step me right into a sinful place. But I think more of this is less about the amount of words than it is about the context and the direction of those words. And that's where the idea of the bit and all those, the bridle comes in mind, because the bridle, it does go in your mouth, so it can stymie word, but at the same time, it's how you steer your words that matter.
Yeah. I think when you talk about the ultimate takeaway from that passage, I would agree. It might include being long-winded, but and
Lord, we hope not.
Well, yeah, definitely not for us on a Sunday morning. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, you think about the passage that we shared the week prior is be slow. I get this wrong every time. I got this wrong at both campuses. Slow to speak, quick to listen. I kept telling people to do the opposite. And so I think it's just kind of that same idea, right? It's just to be careful about what you say. And just like you said, the less you say in some situations, sometimes you're called to say a lot. Sometimes you're having a good conversation. Sometimes you're called to speak. But I think that while that is a part of it, it's definitely more about just what you say, how you say it, who you say it to,
right,
etc.
And Jesus does say that all there's not a single word that will go without some type of judgment. I mean, there's not going to be a loose word that we say that we won't be held accountable for, which is a scary, scary, scary thought.
Yeah, it is heavy, which is probably why we spent so much time in that in that first point.
Right, and this applies to online, by the way, because I know this will be seen online. I talked about the online quite a bit. Like, it does matter what you say and how you say it there. Delete is your friend.
You did, yeah.
Delete is your friend. Trust me. It is. I had to delete a lot of things. The next part was pure and undefiled religion before God the Father is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress. I think what people need to know, I know you read all of the Old Testament passages or the handful of passages that we had for an example. I just mentioned the fact that there are dozens and dozens of
a few.
Yeah, and so there are a bunch. I think the conversation is about orphans and widows because of what they represent more than just being literal there.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. It's not necessarily that you have to only and exclusively go look for that specific type of individual, but what do they represent? I mean, they represent people who can't help themselves,
right?
Who need help,
and it's the most hopeless,
right? Yeah, right. The most hopeless, and so. And one of the things that we talked about, that word compassion, it comes from the Latin word to mean to suffer with. It's not just a feeling. It's not just to feel bad for somebody. It's to get involved in their mess. It's to suffer alongside them. Right. It's to help them through those situations, and that takes some intentionality. That takes some action. And so I'm with you in the sense of help those who cannot help themselves. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's we skipped right by the idea of intentionality in that first point, but it does take intentionality to control your tongue, and it does take intentionality to get into the world of people. It doesn't just happen because people put we're all put in the pathway of somebody. It's real easy to go to Walmart or to the grocery store or wherever you go on a regular church and try to get in and get out without interaction, right? Yeah. But man, sometimes we're called to that interaction.
I know,
and we need to grab a hold of it and hug it and accept it and love it and give it a big old kiss and say, our job is to be available and to intentionally make ourselves available in wherever we go. Does that mean you always? No, of course not. Again, don't be religious with it, like James said. But man, periodically, whenever you go to Walmart or wherever you go, man, you need to be looking for opportunities to share the gospel.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of what makes it a calling, right? Is that it's difficult, and so it's easy to come in on a Sunday and be surrounded by those who think the same way that you do, to listen to the music that makes you feel good, and it helps to allow you to focus in on God and give him the time and the attention that he needs. It's that Monday through Saturday that is the most difficult. And I think, like you said, it's not that every time you wake up, you need to, how do I say this? You don't have to force yourself in every and all situation, but this is why it's so important to be in tune with the Holy Spirit, so you can be aware of the times and situations where you can step in and love on people. And we talked, I don't know if you brought it up, but we talked about the kids saying your walk talks and and basically the idea that what we say is important, but what we do is often much more important, and that's difficult. But there's worship in that difficulty, and so look at it as an opportunity when you have opportunities to be compassionate, as a form of worship rather than something to dread and to look down on.
Right, and the reason I hit on the idea that it is literal. Orphans and widows, but at the same time, they represent those who are most hopeless. Because I think we look at that and go, I need to go help out in, some kind of an orphan home, or that's part of it, but that's not the fullness. Because we have literal people in our audience and who are listening to us right now who are, for better or worse, they are fatherless, right? They are orphans in essence. We have women in our audience and who are listening who have raised, not that they can't do this on their own, but who have raised children on their own.
Like
so they're widows in a context. And so we have all these opportunities, whether in the church, in the streets, in the schools, at our work. There are people everywhere that are lacking those certain things in their life. And I think it's our calling, as you said, and to suffer with them, to listen to them, just to be an ear. It doesn't mean you're always going to sit there and tell them about the cross crucified. Not every time. Sometimes it's just listening, being there for them, suffering with them, helping them where you can.
Those
you got to build a relationship. A lot of times you have to build a relationship long before you get to tell them about Jesus. We want to skip. Some of us want to skip right to the Jesus part, which is good and all.
Yeah, sometimes.
But
right,
they got to hear you first.
Yeah.
And then the last part of that is to keep oneself unstained from the world. That's never easy.
No, I mean this is where these 2 points come from, really, right? I mean, you can't have compassion, you can't have the drive to watch your tongue if you don't have that character. Right. And so I wanted to say as well, just a quick reminder. I don't know if everybody knows this, but we talk about helping children, helping in our schools. There are schools who take volunteer help. And so if you've got some free time, which I know many of us don't, I shouldn't have even phrased it like that. If you've got some time you can let go of, you can get involved in the schools. But that stems from your character, doesn't it? These 2 points stem from the character. Well,
yeah, because it's a sacrifice. And sacrifice is not something most of us want to, sacrifice, no matter what it is painful.
Right.
All of those things, to be intentional in any facet, whether it's your character, whether it's your conversations, whether it's your compassion, it's going to take sacrifice on your part, on our part. You're going to have to sacrifice some time. You're going to have to sacrifice resources. You're going to have to sacrifice comfort. You're going to have to sacrifice something, and that's what this walk's all about.
Yeah.
It is a sacrificial walk. It's a sacrificial life, and I think that's been lost by decades and decades of saying that it's the opposite of that it's all about fruit in the tangible sense, and when it's literally our entire faith is built on this idea of sacrifice.
What we're taking from this passage here in this context is it about what we do? Yes. Is it about what we say? Yes. But it's also about who we are.
Right.
It's about who, as I said, who we become, who we remain, and you touched on this as well in Bollinger County, that we are to be not of the world, but we are to be in the world.
In the world.
And both are important. But you need to make sure that you remain not of the world and guard your character, just as Jesus did. Jesus never compromised who he was, no matter what situation he found himself in. He did not stray away from those that needed him, but he never compromised his integrity or his character. And he is the ultimate example of sacrifice. I mean,
and it's we are to influence the world, not the world influence us.
Right.
And I think that's where. And it's hard sometimes because you really want you're wanting to reach the world. So I know even within the church, and I know people will say that there are certain things that goes on in the modern contemporary setting of church has allowed the world to infiltrate. Which I don't agree with that aspect. Now, are there situations where that's happened? Yes, but we just got to make sure we're influencing the world and not allowing the world to influence us and changing who we are on the inside, right? Changing who we are in the core, changing our beliefs. As you said compromise, but without compromise.
Right.
Yeah. So that is what it's, Jesus never compromised who he was because he had full understanding of who he was.
That's a great point.
And so he had full understanding. So there was no changing, right? He knew his call, he knew his mission, and he knew who he was. So there was no deviation. And so, as long as we have that, as long as we know who we are, we're in Christ, right? We know that what our walk is. We understand all those things. Then it's easier to fully submerge yourself into the world of others without it staining you, for lack of better, because he uses the word stain here, I think, don't he? Yeah, basically that's what it means. And so the big takeaway, character was a tough one because you could go on all day about character because it's a lack thing. And you're right. It's more or less an output of an inward change. And so the big takeaway was this: speak with wisdom, serve with love, and live with integrity so your life reflects Jesus to those around you. This is exactly what we all just said. That was it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And it reminded me almost completely, it's wild at how much it mirrored Colossians 4:5-6. Act wisely towards outsiders, making the most of the time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you should answer each person. They're literally like the big takeaway is almost exactly a rewording of that passage, and which is one of my favorite passages.
Yeah.
And so when I read it, it kind of sparked something in me. That's why the potato chips came up.
That's awesome. And we touched on that passage a little bit earlier in the message, actually, which is great. And I love the way it ends, so that you may know how to respond to each person, each situation. The truth doesn't change. But you need to make sure that you're mindful of how you need to make it palatable, don't you? Yep. I mean, to an extent, without compromise. And because if what we're saying, if what we're trying to do, if our service to others is lost on them, we can't go much farther than simply saying some nice things and doing some kind actions. Right,
because they're looking. I mean, without controlling our tongue, they'll never hear you, right? And without showing compassion, they won't know you love them,
right?
And without a good character, they're going to think you're a hypocrite.
They can't trust us,
right? Exactly. Yeah. So you had to have those three things, and if you have those three elements, then you have an audience.
Yeah,
they will trust you, and they will allow you in their presence and allow you to help them. Yeah. And then guess what? Then the opportunity comes for you to tell them about Christ, to be salt. And it's like, and when you're salty, you leave people thirsty.
Yep.
And so, and that's what we want. We want people longing and thirsting for the things of God. If they thirst and long for the things of God, they'll keep asking questions and they'll keep coming forward. And eventually they'll give their whole life to Christ. And guess what? Yeah, you were part of it, but God brought the increase, so you don't get any credit for it. But you did a lot of work in it.
Yeah. But yeah, one of the things I at the big takeaway towards the end, one of the things that we encouraged one another at Jackson is to think about when all this became real to you. Think about who may have poured into your life. Think about who may have served you. Now think about those in 2025 who do not currently know Jesus, who are currently not living a life for him, but they will if we remain faithful in living our intentional faith on display. And it's so important that we make sure what you just talked about, so we can reflect Jesus in our life to those around us. It's so important.
Exactly right. So be salty.
Be salty.
Be salty.
That's the takeaway. Just be salty. Should have said be salty and just walked off stage.
Just walked off, drop mics. We're going to leave it at that. That's
what does
a wrap.
That mean? Yeah.
We don't know what it means. We'll make a T-shirt about it. That's what we'll do. Sound like a good T-shirt to me.
I like that.
Be salty. Anyway, so to be looking for the T-shirt.
Probably don't do that.
We'll see. But Salt Life. Oh, Lord, no.
Oh, my goodness.
No.
Oh, my goodness.
We quit right now. We're done.
Zach,
this
hit the
is
button.
Yeah, hit that button. We're done. We're finished. The wrap is over. We're wrapping this up. It's all over. We love you guys. We'll see you next week. See you
Appreciate
Sunday.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you guys.